Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Tough Love Thursday episode. I'm so excited for today's topic, as you can probably tell from the title of this. But before I do, I just want to say a huge shout out to all of our new members here in the Simply Balanced Health Facebook group. If you're listening to this on Facebook in my private exclusive community, we've had so many new women joining us who have just registered for the Sugar Freedom Bootcamp that I'm hosting later this month. And everybody's coming in to hang out in the community. And I just want to say a huge, amazing Danny welcome to all of you. I'm so excited to dive deeper into the 3-day boot camp coming up at the end of January. And if this is the first time any of you are hearing about this boot camp or wondering what the heck it is, come and take a look at the registration page and get your name on the list. It is completely free to join us. It's a 3-day powerful jam-packed event that I'm going to be supporting all of you in taking action in the right way to finally feel different about your relationship with sugar and yourself. Now, the topic that we're talking about today, some tough love for all of you today, is actually one of the topics that we'll be diving deeper into in that boot camp, and much, much deeper into actually applying this in your own life in the upcoming Break Free from Sugar program that kicks off in the beginning of February. So I want to give you a little teaser here today because this is a massive topic. I should probably record a whole series on the podcast about perfectionism. So the tough love for all of you today is that perfectionism and your perfectionistic tendencies are actually keeping you stuck on sugar. And the truth and the strange conundrum of this is that this same roots that develop this habit and pattern, or this system of needing to be a perfectionist, for anyone listening to this in the Facebook group, would love to hear, drop a number 7 in the comments below if you relate to being a perfectionist. Are you a perfectionist? Drop the 7s. I know that many of you are. I know that 90% of the women that come and work with me and come through my programs resonate with being a perfectionist, which is why I'm recording this here for all of you today. So just knowing that this deep-rooted drive and quote unquote need to be a perfectionist in all areas of your life is actually rooted in some of the same core wounding that is causing you to cope and numb and escape with sugar and food. So this is one thing that's really, really important to understand, is that perfectionism is actually a coping mechanism that you developed at some time and place to serve a need, to either get the love that you weren't getting that you needed, or to get the acceptance and the belonging that you needed. There was a purpose in your younger years of life where you learned that in order to get something, a basic need that you needed as a child, you had to be perfect at something, right? You had to be the good girl. You had to get perfect grades. You had to be really good at everything. And then you would get these rewards from the people around you. And it's usually with your caregivers. So there's a lot to say there, but that's a really quick way of describing like this tendency. So perfectionism is something that we developed, or you developed, if you relate to this. Again, drop those 7s below if you're a perfectionist, to cope and to ultimately survive. So there's a very real nervous system imprint of survival that is at the root of your perfectionist tendencies. Now, that is the same root that is most likely driving you to also cope and escape with sugar. So there's a link here at the root. Perfectionism is a byproduct of some inner turmoil and an inner coping mechanism that you developed at some point in your life. So that's one thing that's really important to understand. And the second reason why perfectionism is really causing you to stay hooked on sugar is because the unfortunate truth is that we live in a world where nothing is perfect. Perfectionism is actually a false goal. To be perfect at something is subjective, right? What's perfect to me isn't what's perfect to you, right? And we all have sort of a different definition in all areas of life of what perfection looks like and means. So this means there's no clear guidelines. There's no black and white world that we live in. There's also no control in other aspects of our life. We can't control what our boss wants or needs or feels. We can't control what our siblings or our spouses have to say to us, right? Or want to do. So there's a lot of ways that we're not in control. And where we get caught up in this is when and if any of you resonating to this have that drive to be perfect at something in life, you're almost setting yourself up for constant failure all the time, because the truth of the universe is nothing's actually perfect. Nothing is actually perfect. everything's imperfectly perfect, right? This is one of those like really interesting laws when we actually look at perfectionism. Is there ever such a thing? Now, there may be doing a really good job at something. There may be perfectly being yourself, right? And again, those are all internal guideposts based off of your unique identification of what perfection is. So, setting yourself up to be perfect at, say, writing the perfect email or having the perfect conversation with your husband or having the perfect relationship with sugar or your kids, right? All of these are super subjective. And in that, we ultimately will always fail. And as soon as you do, you're probably going straight for the sugar, right? We set ourselves up for this constant this pressure that we put on our shoulders to be perfect at something, to write the perfect email, for example. We will use this really basic email, right? As an example. And you're sitting there for hours stressing, reading, rewriting, rewriting, sending it to your friends so they can proofread it, writing. And the pressure and the energy of perfectionism is super toxic. And it starts to create this turmoil of anxiety, of worry, of inner stress, and it activates a stress response in the nervous system. And most of us are then going to use sugar to cope with that stress, to self soothe, to attempt to comfort ourselves if something isn't perfect or doesn't go according to plan. Right? We end up in this vicious cycle of trying to do this perfect job at something or have the perfect relationship. And when it doesn't pan out, or in the midst of attempting to achieve that thing, we end up in this complete whirlwind and tornado of heavy toxic emotions that for all of us are driving that need to escape, right? These turmoil, this tornado inside of us, the pressure that we put on ourselves is exhausting. It's really difficult to feel. It's uncomfortable. It's icky. It's heavy. It's, I want to avoid it. And as soon as we have that internal response in our body and in our nervous system, we're going to quickly run and grab for the things that we use to cope, whether that's binging on Netflix or scrolling on Instagram or eating all the sugar. So, this is a massive conundrum because many of you out there are really trying to be perfect. And this really strongly shows up in every single one of my clients as they try to create this relationship with sugar that's perfect. I'm using air quotes for those of you who are listening to this recording on the podcast. There's no such thing as a perfect relationship with sugar. So, how can you create your own guidelines of imperfection, right? And invite in the feminine approach to our relationship with sugar that we really dive deep into in my programs and in the upcoming Break Free from Sugar program. So, I just want you to understand that, first of all, this perfectionist tendency that many of you are struggling with is no longer serving you. It may, in some areas, be serving you because it is an old coping mechanism, right? And to replace that with new coping mechanisms that are healthy is a big process and takes a lot of guidance and a lot of commitment and a lot of, time and implementation to do that, which is why we dive into this in the Break Free from Sugar program. So for now, I want you to really just reflect for yourself, even just identifying if you are a perfectionist and starting to get curious on where the root causes of that perfectionism is for you and how for you specifically this perfectionism is probably driving your sugar cravings and driving you to reach for more sugar, whether it's the pressure of striving to be perfect at something and just that energy of the pressure and the weight on your shoulders, that knot in your stomach, or is it other emotions that it brings up when you possibly fail at something, when you're not perfect? If you send an email and there was a whole typo in it or a whole sentence that was horrible grammar, right? How do you treat yourself? What thoughts show up for you there? And how is that actually then internally driving you to go and get something sweet to self-soothe? So this is a powerful one. I'm excited. I'm going to record a longer podcast episode on this because I absolutely love talking about perfectionism. And to be honest, I think it's one of the things that has supported me the most in my journey with sugar is not being a perfectionist. Not being. My coping mechanisms were absolutely other things. But I've lived with perfectionists. I know what perfectionism is. Most of my clients struggle with it, and I've seen it time and time again as such a detriment to your success and your happiness. It just robs you of all of these things that I know that you want. So here's to shifting out of perfectionism. And don't forget to come and join us. We're going to get started on that journey for you at the upcoming Sugar Freedom Bootcamp. You can register for that in the show notes below or down below this video. I'll post the link and I can't wait to see you there. All right, everyone. We'll see you next week for another Tough Love Thursday.